Hi guys. Okay, so here we are, Unit 14, I think, if we're numbering them correctly, and we are to the digestive system. So it is another system that is contained pretty much in the, excuse me, speaking of digestion, I just finished my lunch, in the abdomen, as you can see from that picture right there. Those are the major organs of the digestive system. Now, clearly, the food and all the products and all that kind of stuff are dispersed throughout the body, but this is where all of the digestion and absorption take place. And those are the two things that the digestive system does. Digests foods that you take in, breaks them down into pieces small enough to be absorbed into the bloodstream so that those pieces can be carried to cells. Those cells can then use that food as an energy source, can go through cellular respiration, all the stuff we talked about in biology a couple of years ago, in order for your cells to function, which means you function. And so remember, we're not going to go into all the chemistry, into all of the detail of that, but we are going to talk about the anatomy. So the digestive system is divided into two groups. You either have the alimentary canal, which is the GI tract, or the accessory digestive organs. And so this GI tract is this whole long thing. Let me see if I can. So this whole long tube. So it goes right down here. Here's your stomach. It goes in there, and then it goes and kind of winds around. So it goes back here to your small intestine first, and then it gets over into your large intestine and then out. So it's not a straight line, but it is one continuous tube. It goes through your ventral body cavity, and it's open at both ends, your mouth and your anus, and technically your body is a tube within a tube. And so this inner tube is this GI tract. Now, leading into that in different parts, or at least associated with the alimentary canal, are the accessory digestive organs. So these are either things that help actually take in or break down the food in some way, or they contribute enzymes, chemicals that will help with chemical digestion. Okay, so we're starting out with the cell layers, and should look kind of similar to what we talked about when we talked about the blood vessels. And they similarly have different layers that have different characteristics and help, basically kind of move stuff along. So first off, you have the mucosa, excuse me. It's the innermost layer. It is the mucous membrane. And this is the lining of the lumen. Lumen is just a fancy word for cavity. So it lines the lumen from the mouth to the anus. So this is everything in your GI tract. This is what is in direct contact with your food. And the mucus itself is secreted here, obviously hence the name, but also there are different enzymes that can be secreted here, hormones that can be secreted. Remember, we tend to think of hormones as like, puberty type stuff. Hormones are any chemical signal that your body sends. And so these chemical signals can help, move digestion along, or help, help kind of shut things down, kind of whatever it is. Also, this mucosa in some areas can help absorb digested particles. Also, it helps protect against diseases, and is technically part of your immune system also. Then you have the submucosa, and this is loose connective tissue. There's blood vessels, there's nerves in there. The blood, of course, carries away these absorbed nutrients, takes them after they've been broken down physically and chemically into your body, into your cells. The nerves help to stimulate muscle contractions in the next layer, which we'll get to, and just help kind of move things along. So then you have the muscle layer. And this is peristalsis, which is the kind of squeezing, pushing down that you see in your esophagus. Remember, the food gets kind of squeezed down. It doesn't just fall down in there. But then also segmentation that occurs in your intestines, and helps kind of segment little packets, I guess, of food to help your body absorb the different nutrients more easily. And then the last one is the outer layer. It's connective tissue. It holds your digestive organs in place. And it's kind of slick. It does secrete kind of a fluid that helps kind of lubricate the outside, particularly around like your stomach and even your esophagus, because they are moving, and so they are going to rub against the other organs or other body parts that are in those areas, and so it helps kind of keep everything kind of greased in there. That's a gross word, sorry. Okay, now the digestive process. So these are the steps. So you start out by ingesting something. This is where you take food into your digestive tract, put it in your mouth. And then you have propulsion, and this is the movement of the food through the alimentary canal. So it starts off by swallowing. So using your tongue and your teeth and in like your cheeks, that helps you to push the food back to the back of your mouth, and you swallow it. Once it is down into your throat area, then it starts to move down by peristalsis, which are the muscle contractions and relaxations, and that helps slowly move the food down. Along the way, and it's kind of really going along with the first step, you do have some mechanical digestion. This is chewing. So you break up the food a little bit. In your mouth, you have saliva, and your tongue is working constantly to mix food and to move it around in there to help mix that saliva in with the food, because that starts the next step, which will be the chemical breakdown. But mechanically still, once the food gets into your stomach contracts and moves around, and the lining of your stomach is kind of ridgy. It's not real smooth in there, so it kind of helps kind of knead it all together. And then you have segmentation, and this is just little constrictions of the intestines that help move food through, help increase the rate of absorption. So again, all this is like movement, mechanical. Chemically, your body is working to break foods down into monomers, like the smallest, unit of a compound, and so that they're small enough to be absorbed by a cell. And this is done starting with the enzymes that are contained in your saliva and all the way through. Stomach acids, your intestines will also chemically mix things in to help break food sources up. Absorption, just like it sounds, as you have these food sources are passing through your GI tract, different areas will absorb particles, the actual food. They will absorb vitamins, minerals, water can be absorbed or is absorbed, and then last but not least, you get rid of the stuff that your body doesn't use or can't digest, and that is defecation. Okay, so now we're going into the parts now. So we're just going to kind of walk our way kind of down the digestive system. So we're starting with the mouth. And so this is an oral cavity. So this is an opening formed by your lips, your cheeks, your tongue, and your palate. So those are kind of the surrounding sides. So you start with chewing. This is called mastication, and it's mixing of the food with different enzymes that are in your saliva. Your lips and your cheeks, remember we talked about this when we talked about some of the facial muscles, help to hold the food in between your teeth during chewing, otherwise it just kind of squishes out everywhere. It is, like the reason sometimes you like bite the side of your cheek and it hurts really bad because you don't think about it again, but your cheeks are kind of pushing in to keep your food in the right position. Your tongue is holding and repositioning food. And like I said before, it helps to really kind of get stuff mixed up. It also forms the food into a bolus or a lump at the back of your throat. And this is what kind of starts that swallowing process. I threw that in there. Obviously, you know this, but just in case you forgot, remember your tongue also helps us speak clearly. At the top, you have your hard palate. So this is like the ridges. If you run your tongue along the top, you can kind of feel that knob kind of in the middle. And then in front of that is the hard palate. And this is just your tongue pushes your food up against that hard palate when you're chewing. The ridges in there help, kind of like an old-timey washboard, help provide some friction, can grate the food up a little bit. You pretty much don't think of any of that while you are chewing, because that would probably take some of the joy out of your food. But all of this is going on, and then back behind, you have your soft palate, and it, as you swallow, kind of closes off your nasopharynx. That's why, so food doesn't go up. Your uvula is back there to do this, and so that helps you, that push to get stuff started down into your throat and esophagus. Okay, so now in your mouth you have your salivary glands, and these can be inside and outside of the mouth. And technically, remember, that sounds weird. Remember, your mouth is defined by your teeth and the sides, your lips, all that kind of stuff. So you do have some salivary glands kind of out, like between your teeth and your cheeks. So that's kind of what that is. Okay, so saliva. It helps keep your mouth clean, first of all. It helps dissolve food chemicals so that we can taste them. It actually releases certain parts to give us our sense of taste. It helps to moisten the food, wet the food a little bit. It helps us kind of pack it into that bolus. And then there are enzymes in there that begin specifically the breakdown of starches. Starches are a little bit harder for your body to work with, and so you start early breaking them down. So there are two types of salivary glands, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic is outside of the mouth. And I'll show you a picture of this on the next page, I believe. But there are three extrinsic glands. You have the parotid gland. This lies right back here. It is in front of your ear, but it's between the skin and the masseter muscle. It's where none of you have experienced this, I think. It's where you would feel, where you'd feel inflammation if you had the mumps, because an inflamed parotid gland is mumps. This is the one, though, sometimes when you eat something that's really sour or really, has a sharp taste to it, it hurts back here. That affects your parotid gland. So it is trying to get more saliva out. The submandibular gland lies along the side of your mandible. So this is the one that's kind of over on both sides. Actually, your parotid gland is also. And then your sublingual gland. This is in front of the submandibular gland and under your tongue. Gleeking, if you have ever heard, that highly technical term. Some people, you can raise your tongue up and gleek. That's coming out of your sublingual gland. And intrinsically, inside the mouth, you have what they call buccal glands. Remember that these muscles have a similar name. And so these are small glands that are found throughout the lining of your cheeks, and they are also producing saliva. Okay, so here is the picture of all of that. So the parotid gland, okay, so this big one right back here, and they show them, their pictures look kind of weird, but that shows, they have a lot of different little channels and a lot of different little crevices and stuff that produce a bunch of saliva. And then you have a duct here, so that just leads down into your mouth. And then you have the submandibular, which is kind of low. It looks kind of funny on here. It's kind of low down here, but it really runs along the side of your jaw. And then the sublingual is under your tongue, which is right here. And so, again, they're all contributing to helping kind of start the digestion of your food. Okay, so here's some teeth for you. So teeth are a big part of mechanical digestion. They help to tear up your food, to grind it into smaller pieces, and they are classified into 3 or 4, depending on how you look at it, different groups, looking at shape and function. So you have your incisors. So these are basically your front 4 on top and on bottom. So here, this is an incisor, 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 and then down here, oops, this one's going to show 1, 2, 3, 4. So those help you to cut stuff off. So when you just bite into something, like you take a bite of your sandwich, that helps cut it, and then you can, pull that piece away. The canines which are your pointy teeth. So here's one, and they kind of hidden the one over here, but here's the other one. They are more fang-like. They're more cone-shaped. They are used to pierce and tear. By comparison, like if you look at your dog or your cat, their canines are usually much bigger than ours because of their preferred way to eat, hunting and stalking a prey of some sort or prey of some sort. And so those are a little bit more pointy and different in other teeth sets in animals. And then you have the premolars, which are bicuspids, and then the molars. So sometimes those are broken into two groups. But those, you can see kind of the flat part right here. These are molars. All these guys back here are molars. If you use your tongue and kind of, you can figure out where your canine is, it's pointy teeth. Right behind it, you have teeth, especially on the top. It's a little more easy to feel it. You have teeth that have very two distinct like projections down. That's where the bicuspid comes from. And they're shaped that way on top, and they fit right into the bicuspid that is meeting it with the lower jaw. And so these help crush things up. They help to grind food into smaller and smaller pieces. So as you go back to the molars, the tops get a little flatter, and that helps with the grinding part. Okay, so now the pharynx, we talked about that, obviously a little bit with the respiratory system. So food passes through here. This is the area where food and air can kind of coexist. But this is the back of your mouth, the oropharynx, and then also your laryngopharynx, so everything above your larynx. And then on the other side of your larynx, you have your esophagus. And so it is a muscular tube. We've talked about, depending on how tall you are, about 10 inches. And it works through muscle contractions to do peristalsis. And so it pushes the food down continuously towards the stomach. And it goes through a hole in your diaphragm. So it pierces the diaphragm, gets down into your abdomen. And that is kind of the dividing line, remember, between your cardiovascular area, like behind your ribs, and then down into your abdomen. But it joins the stomach at what they call the cardiac orifice. Cardiac is because it is very close to the heart. And then that orifice is an opening. It is surrounded by the cardiac or the gastroesophageal sphincter. And this is a little valve that helps to keep the stomach closed. We'll talk more about it, but people who have like acid reflux or GERD, this little sphincter has problems, and so sometimes you'll have the stomach acid come up into like this little part of your esophagus. And your esophagus isn't really designed to deal with that much acid like your stomach is, and so that's what causes feel like that heartburn feeling. Okay, so now the stomach. So this is just basically a big expansion of your alimentary canal, your GI tract. It's a storage tank. It does do some stuff. So food doesn't just sit in there, but it kind of stores the food and is a place to let the food kind of set and then help kind of digestion move along. It is on, the left side of your abdominal cavity. It's behind and kind of up underneath the liver and the diaphragm. Adults have a stomach that is about 10 inches long, so, not super big. And when it's empty, it can be very small. It has a volume of about 50 milliliters. So that's, I'll show you in class. I should have them sitting here. That's a little beaker size, and it's not very big. But it can extend up to 4 liters, which is a lot. And so, you can eat a lot. I can. But this is where chemical breakdown happens. This is where you're really breaking down the proteins. Proteins typically are held together really well. And so it takes more acid, it takes more just real chemical reaction to work. And the food at this point gets turned into a kind of a paste, and that is called, chyme. I've heard it pronounced chime. I really don't know which one is technically correct. But then it also continues kind of the physical breakdown. Notice on that picture you have kind of those little, they're labeled gastric folds there. So they're little crevices and raised areas in your stomach that help just really mash the food up really well. The kneading and twisting. So it's really a very mobile little organ in there. And once the food has been in the stomach, I don't know, 4 hours is kind of, I know, the longest estimate of that. Once the food has been in there, a certain amount of time and has gone through the majority of the chemical and mechanical breakdown that the stomach is capable of, the chyme gets passed into the small intestine. And so, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, your stomach does have the ability to absorb certain substances. Aspirin can be absorbed into your bloodstream through the lining of your stomach. Alcohol, certain drugs. Some of them, like you'll take like some medicines that will, say they have a chemical release or they have some kind of capsule on them, so they'll get further into your intestines before they dissolve and can be absorbed. It just kind of depends on what the drug is for. Some medicines can cause stomach irritation because they work against or don't necessarily work against, but they add to the acidity of your stomach, and then your stomach just kind of can't deal with all that acid. Okay, now the small intestine. Okay, so this is really the biggest part of your digestive system. This is where like it all really takes place. So it starts at the pyloric sphincter, and this is the connection to the stomach, and it runs all the way to the ileocecal valve, which is the connection to the large intestine. So that's from the beginning to end. In a living person, it can extend up to 6 feet. I don't know how they measured that, quite honestly. But in a cadaver, it's more like 20 feet. And mostly that's because of, in a living person, you can't really release all of the connections and all the things that are holding the stomach in there. The mesentery, which are the fibers that hold everything in place. And then as well as it being, a fairly muscular organ. But still. It is about 1 inch in diameter, so that's where the small part comes from, because it is a small tube, essentially. It is made of 3 segments. The duodenum, just like saying that word. The duodenum is the very first part of the small intestine. This is where more enzymes and more digestive chemicals are added. Bile, which we'll get to, pancreatic juices go in right in this area. And so you continue with the chemical breakdown. And then the jejunum is like the middle part. And this is where you have mixing, where you have segmentation. And you can kind of see on this picture, they're not really where the segments are, but you have that kind of like these little folds in different places. That is kind of the hallmark of the jejunum, all of those different little areas. And then you have the ileum. And the ileum is this little kind of duct right here that leads into the large intestine. It's kind of, the large intestine is kind of grayed out area. It kind of runs along here too. But that's where those things connect. Okay, so now we'll get to the large intestine. That'll be our last thing. But some accessory organs, first of all, the liver and the gallbladder. These are the producers, first of all, of bile, the liver. And remember, the bile helps to, as part of digestion, and the gallbladder stores bile. Now, bile itself is kind of a greenish fluid. Sometimes if you've had the stomach bugs or, the different things that make you vomit quite a bit, once your stomach is empty, if you still throw up stuff, sometimes you will vomit up some bile, and it's kind of a greenish juice. Gross. It is an emulsifier, and emulsifiers basically help your body dissolve fats. And so if you have some, eat a meal that is high in fat, then your body will respond by producing more bile, to help you break that down a little bit. And then the gallbladder, which is this little green guy right there, is just storage. Gallbladder is one of those organs that you don't really need. People have their gallbladders removed all the time. It does make it a little bit harder, make you a little more uncomfortable if you eat something really fatty, because you don't have, your liver will continue to produce bile, it's just not stored. It has to be kind of produced as needed. Then we have the pancreas, and this picture shows it. So they show you, it's kind of, so here's, let's see, here's your stomach right here, and then your pancreas is this kind of, looks kind of like, I don't even know what I want to say it looks like. I won't say, but it's kind of back behind the stomach. And this is another organ that produces enzymes, and this one helps you break down all types of food. This your pancreas is associated, you're really aware of it if you are diabetic, because your pancreas doesn't produce the necessary enzymes that help your body break down all the foods they need, which means your blood sugars, basically the amount of food that is in your system at any one time, is lower at different points. And so people who are diabetic have to regulate those different sugar or blood levels, blood food levels, and unfortunately goes back to the pancreas and not being able to produce specifically insulin. Okay, last part of the digestive system, the large intestine. So it kind of forms a little hut around the small intestine on the three sides, and it goes from the ileocecal valve, which we talked about at the very end of the small intestine, and all the way around to the anus. Its main job is to absorb water. So this gets all of the water out of your system. Your body can use that water, but if it doesn't, then this gets filtered in through your kidneys, and then it's urine. But it helps also to eliminate solid waste. If you have some kind of stomach bug, again, we call them stomach bugs, really it's an intestinal bug, that prevents your large intestines from absorbing enough water. That's when you have like diarrhea and that kind of stuff. So you're welcome for that. Okay, so now 5 parts of the large intestine. You have the cecum, and so this is where this the ileocecal valve leads in, so right there, and so that's into your cecum. And then you have kind of hanging off of it, this little guy right there, that's the appendix. It does play a role, especially when you're younger, in your immune system. As you get older, again, it's kind of one of those organs where you don't really need it, but when you're younger, in particular, your appendix helps with immune responses. Okay, so then you go into the colon, and this picture kind of labels, you have the ascending colon, pardon me, that's where food is being pushed up, and then you have kind of the transverse, kind of the flat part, and then the descending colon. That leads down into the rectum, which is this little area right here. And then finally, you have the anal canal and the anus. So that's where food comes out. Or not food. That is where fecal matter, feces, comes out. And so the rectum helps to separate out, at times, like air from solid. So this is where gas, this is where gas kind of comes from. But you have all of these, everything kind of plays its own little role in digestion. Okay, it's kind of a good way to end right there. So in class, like I said, we will do a little bit more on just some issues with the digestive system, some nutritional stuff. Of course, if you're watching this video and you have questions, feel free to ask me. Goodbye, kids.